Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to this Microsoft Teams live event. I'm Taran Sohal, one of the account managers at Cloud2. This is the first time we're running a meeting like this, so just for everyone's benefit, the way Teams Live works is that only the presenters will speak and are allowed to speak, and any questions that are posted that you wish to submit, they'll go through a moderation process before they're made visible to everyone on the event. We've got a significant number of attendees and growing already on the event. I'd like to, it's so nice to see people registering and attending from places like Canada, Norway, India, as well as our friends in the NHS. Before we get into the details, I'll just give you a quick introduction to Cloud2. We work with over 50 NHS trusts with a focus on Power BI and Azure data services, things like analysis services, data factory, data lake, Synapse. And within these technologies, there's kind of three things we offer. Firstly, consulting, advice and guidance. Secondly, accelerators and Kickstarter packages to help NHS trusts get up and running with Power BI and Azure. And finally, pre-built solutions such as the SPC custom visuals that we're kind of running this event in relation to. And the SPC visuals that we have built have been done in partnership with East London Foundation Trust. And I think it's time to move on to the agenda and we can get into the detail of today's session. We're due to run until 12:30. After that, we'll have some time for Q&A, and the Q&A will be managed by Oliver Chan, my colleague, who's our SPC product lead at Cloud2. As you can see on the agenda, we've got speakers from East London Foundation Trust. We've got Dr. Amar Shah, Tom Nicholas, and Forid Alom. Their roles and topics are on the slide, so I'm not going to read them out. All I really want to say is they're a brilliant team to work with. So I guess without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Amar.
Thank you very much, Taran, and it's a real pleasure to be with you today for this webinar, which promises to be a really exciting discussion and a joy to work with you and the team at Cloud2. As a quick introduction to the session today, over the last decade, we're seeing the evolution of quality approaches in healthcare all across the globe, with the adoption of best practice quality management. That's got its roots in the redesign of manufacturing that came about post-World War II in Japan and then spread across the globe. And with that best practice comes a real focus on understanding variation in our processes and the introduction of statistical methods that were first introduced by Walter Schuhart at Bell Labs, which later became AT&T. Now, the purpose of statistical process control is to help us make better decisions through an understanding of variation, both when variation is normal and as a factor of the design of the system, but also when variation is abnormal and something we should be paying attention to and investigating. So statistical process control techniques are now used in a variety of industries, and manufacturing, for example, has a plethora of control charts that are used for different purposes. In healthcare, though, we still sometimes see a reliance on just one or two SPC charts. And that has the issue of both underutilizing the power, the potential power of this tool, but also potentially leading us to make the wrong decisions. So I'm really interested to hear today your thoughts on how we might be able to use the full range of statistical process control charts to help us understand variation and make better decisions for our patients and our staff. So with that introduction, I'm going to hand on to Tom.
Thank you very much, Amar. So this is a question that has
been in the back of my mind for at least a couple of years now. I've spent a significant part of my SPC journey simply plotting all my data using an XMR chart or an individual chart. Yet I have known that there are other charts available, and I've always wondered why these charts are available, but I've often still ploughed the same furrow. And I won't be the only one. There'll be other people out there who have just remained within the safety of the XMR chart. And this is about some of my experience that I've had since returning to East London, who use the full suite and full range of XMR charts. And what I'd like to do now is demonstrate to you why they are using the full range of XMR charts, full range of statistical process control charts, and not just the XMR individual charts, and what the benefits are to doing that, and benefits that you might want to realize yourselves. So the first piece of information, the first question to you is all data created equal? And of course, it's not. And if we use statistical process control to model systems to understand when change takes place, surely we want that model to be as accurate as we can, and surely we want to put as much information into that model as we possibly can. And that's why we should always possibly consider things like cohort sizes. So how often have you quoted a percentage to somebody and the immediate question has come back, how many people does that, or what's the population that that percentage represents? That's always a key factor. And similarly, for example, if you had a 25% failure rate, is it more concerning when it comes from 500 people rather than 5? Most people would say it is. With more weight of data, with more data in the model, you can often make more confident decisions. There are other considerations. So what about frequent and non-frequent events? I've had so many conversations with people over the years about things like rare events. Can we truly model frequent events and non-frequent events similarly, or should we perhaps adopt a different SPC chart or different model? And of course, there are other considerations about different data types as well. But for this session, I'd just like to concentrate on those first two. Because like I say, if we're using SPC as a model, why wouldn't we want to take advantage and put as much information into that model as we possibly can to get the most refined results to make decisions from? And my final point to you, which I hope I'm going to go through now, is what happens when the XMR chart treats all these aspects the same? Cohort size, frequent events, non-frequent events, all the same. It models them all similarly. Does it even matter? So my first example is of the P chart. So I'm going to introduce a scenario for you here to hopefully make it a bit more visual. So we're going to imagine a very simple clinic with 25 people per day attending over a 25-day period. And they are just going to report a little bit like the friends and family test if they are happy or sad with their treatment. In this very simple scenario, we're going to assume that the pathway is set up so that 2/3 of patients are always happy, and unfortunately the remaining third will be sad. So that's the scenario we find ourselves in. So what would the data recording be like in a setup like this? Well, you could imagine it's something like this. We've got 25 days. We've got 25 people each day. We've got 2/3 the chance of someone being happy regardless of any other factor. And then of course we'd have a happiness count each day, which will have some variation within it. But overall, over the course of time, you can see we get very close to the model that we're expecting of about 2/3 happy. So what SPC chart might we pick for a model like this? Well, here at East London, and it's going to be shared in the resources at the end, we have a very simple flow chart to describe which statistical process control chart is best for your model. And I'm going to show you with this example how easy it can be. So the first question is, do we have attribute data, data that can only take particular values? Well, of course we do. It's happy or it's sad. Do we have count data? Well, no, we don't. We have classification data. It's like a pass-fail, happy or sad. And there, with those simple questions, we've arrived at the P chart. But of
course, alternatively, we could just continue to use the XMR chart and not go through that simple process. And what would be the difference if we did? So here we go. At this stage, I've got those two different models on the screen. We've got the XMR, the individuals and the moving range at the top, and we've got the P-chart at the bottom. So what can we spot at this stage? Well, even with consistent cohort sizes, 25 people a day, we can already see that we've got some differences inside those control limits. Already at this stage, and for those of you who have looked at the P-chart formula, you will know that the P-chart formula sets those control limits knowing it's a percentage. The individuals charts doesn't know it's a percentage, it's plotting a number like any other. And the result, already at this stage, you've got slightly more refined model based on the intelligence that you've given it. But of course, we don't live in a perfect world, and at the moment, this is a very perfect scenario. What happens when we begin to see, as we'd expect, different amount of people arriving at our clinic on different days, as we'd expect in a real world environment? So anything between 5 and 25 people each day. So now again, over the course of time, we still arrive at our 2/3 happiness model, but we would expect much more variation in our day-to-day variance. And here's what it looks like now. So now we're beginning to see the effects of a more intelligence model, using the right model for this scenario. So what can we see in the P-chart at the bottom? Well, we can see the control limits contracting when we've got a lot of information. So when we've had lots of attendees, 24 in the clinic in a particular day, the control limits have been contracted. When we have less attendees, the control limits widen. And of course, this is what we'd expect. With the weight of data, we're more confident in our decisions, and therefore we can make decisions faster. With less data, we have to apply a little bit more of uncertainty, and that's the strength of the P-chart. The individual chart there at the top on the left-hand side treats every day the same. But one question, of course, you might have back to me now is, you notice the control limits are different, but there's still no special cause variation in either model. But of course, we wouldn't expect any special cause variation at this stage. We're just plotting random data that's not changing. But how will these models be affected when something does start to change? So let's change our model. So we've gone from 2/3 being happy, something very bad has gone wrong in this clinic, and we've had a reversal. So now only 1/3 is happy, 2/3 being sad. So that's a significant change, and you'd expect to see that in a statistical process control chart. So here's how the two models are affected by that significant change. So you can see the individuals chart here with its wide process limits hasn't picked up any immediate change. It certainly will pick up change over time. So after 6, 7 or 8 iterations, depending on your rules for a shift special cause, it will pick up that change over time, but it hasn't picked up that dramatic change by any points out of the process limits. They're quite wide. The P-chart, however, you can see with its extra information on the cohort sizes, picks up change a lot faster, and we've had 2 out of process limits rule breaks already. Now, obviously, this is one model running one set of random numbers, and you can set your own random numbers and set different models to have a look at. And sometimes what you will find is similar to the examples I've outlined, that you will have similar examples where the P-chart, with its knowledge that it's working with a percentage, with its knowledge of cohort sizes, will give you a faster result to understanding when significant things have changed. Sometimes also you will find out that the XMR chart, the change is so dramatic that it picks up the change at a similar time frame. But my message to you would be that with that extra information, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of a model that's slightly more refined and has got slightly more intelligence? Because in all cases, the P-chart will pick up that change at least as fast as the XMR chart, and often a lot faster. So I think that's a great opportunity for you to go away and, like myself, who's previously continually used the XMR individuals chart, to start using some of those more in more sort of advanced models and seeing the change it can possibly make with your data. Now, I struck gold this week because random numbers are one thing, as you know, but it's great to have a real life example. And this is a real life example that I just picked up this week to do with the friends and family test. So this is a very relevant example. So have a look at the left-hand side there. We have 2 points, one in March and one in November, almost identical. But one's in special cause and one's not in special cause. How can that be? Well, because in March, we actually improved our collection method for collecting responses to the family and friends test, and we got 600 responses compared to the 400 in November. So with that extra data, that extra weight of data, and that extra confidence, those control limits changed and actually gave us a different perspective on our data. Have a look at the XMR individuals chart on the right hand side. You can see the limits are unchanged, and that's something for you just to take away with you, that those limits will be the same no matter what the cohort size. So if we receive 10 responses in a month or 1,000 responses in the month, the limits would stay the same. So if you're dealing with data that where we have different cohort sizes on a month-to-month basis, why wouldn't you want that extra knowledge in your model? Going to talk about the T-chart now, another example. So this is particularly for infrequent events. Again, it's very easy using the flow chart to identify the chart. Do we have count data? Well, in this example, yes, we do. Is it a rare event? Yes, it is. We arrive at the T-chart. A simpler model for you here. So let's imagine an event that happens randomly every 50 to 60 days, quite rare event, but then something significant happens. For every iteration beyond the baseline, we actually get an increase of frequency every 5 days, running right down in November there in 2019 to the event actually running between 10 and 20 days. So significant increase in frequency. I've got the T-chart there plotted at the top, and I've got an individuals chart there plotted at the bottom based on the month these events happen. The first thing I want you to notice is how good the T-chart is at modelling our data. If you look at the lower control limit there in the T-chart, it probably falls at about 47 days. Now that's a great model considering we've placed random numbers between 50 and 60 days. So already it's got a good sense of the system it's working within. The individuals chart at the bottom, the model's not as strong. You can see the control limit there is set at almost 3 instances per month. That's the control limit. Of course, we know operating between 50 and 60 days, that's quite a loose tripwire for something changing. And as you can see in this model, you can clearly see the T-chart picks up that increase of frequency very quickly and establishes something's changed. In the XMR chart at the bottom, measuring monthly incidents, it actually takes 6 more months to pick up that change once we get 3 events within a month. So again, a stronger model for modeling infrequent events with the T-chart. Another example here, and this is working the opposite way round. So we've got an event happening 1 to 50 days, and then we double it to happening 1 to 100 days. And this time I'd like you to concentrate on the average line there. So in the top chart, the average line is set at about 26 days. Again, very good model for the baseline that we've set of a random event happening between 1 and 50 days. Again, the XMR chart at the bottom, not such a good model for this particular circumstance. You can see it's set between about 1.5 and 2 events per month, which we know isn't as accurate with 26 days expected. So again, just to re-emphasize that point, is using a stronger model, using a more appropriate model for your data will bring you faster results and understand change a lot quicker. Of course, there are more specialist charts that you can use, and again, we've got our resource guide that will be provided to you to help you, and I would advise you to take this as an example use some of these different charts and just see the effects and the changes it makes to your data. So at this stage, I'm going to pass over to Forid, and he's going to talk about the journey that we've had at East London with our control charts.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes just giving a quick overview of ELF's journey in adopting SPC Chart at scale. So our trust first got started playing with SPC charts, or even just data over time, back in January 2013. So what we did is, here's a few screenshots of our board report, and you can see there's a whole bunch of data there, and it's very hard to make sense of. So what we did was we initially started off with just trying line charts. So if we move on to the next slide, you'd see we categorized some of our measures, and then we started exploring just line charts. So eased into the change from just going from the RAG rating and the table data. And then once we tested with line charts, we moved on to using run charts. So from moving on to the next slide, Tom, you see here we tested with run charts, and then we slowly moved on to control charts. So by October 2017, our board report included a whole series of control charts. And right now we've been focusing on the two elements, the two phases of SPC charts. One is about creation, and the second one is about using the right control chart types. The third bit, which is going to be a topic of a later webinar, is around phasing. So you can see here, a lot of these charts have been phased, where you see in the control limits stepped based on special cause variations. But the board underwent training around SPC with the help of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, so we can make sure that they can make sense of what the charts are telling them. So by October 2017, all the board charts were SPC charts, and then we'd have a report that would be provided along with this that gives you some narrative. And as you're already aware, with SPC charts, the great thing about it is it allows you to pinpoint attention on where you need to focus your energy. If it's in normal variation, then it doesn't need to give so much of your attention. And that's why it's so important to choose the right chart type, because as Tom alluded to before, if you're using an XMR chart as opposed to, say, a P chart, you might be thinking you're in common cause variation and there's nothing to worry about, but actually there is something that you can pinpoint using if you're using the right chart, like a P chart. And at the bottom left, you'd see the two tools that we've used. So with line charts, you can just use an Excel a template, and then you've got other Excel templates available now. I know HSI provide a whole series of Excel templates around developing SPC charts, but that's okay for when you're producing a small number of SPC charts. Once you get to creating them on a regular basis, you might need a more specialized software such as QR macros. So these charts that you're looking at is created using a add-in in Excel called QR macros, and there's a more simpler version too called QR charts. But again, these are all manual, and they're reliant on you using an Excel data table and then using the add-in to create a chart. So it does take a bit of time, and I think they suffice when you've got a small when you're using SPC charts at a small scale. For example, just a specific report, like for our case, it was a board report, so it worked. But as SPC charts became more known within the organization and people are getting trained on it and more comfortable using it, that solution was no longer viable. So if we move on to the next slide, we started doing some work on our reporting services. So we had a developer who'd hard coded in some of these formulas, and so we could create SPC charts automate the creation of SPC charts. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot of our old quality and performance dashboard, which used to take data directly from the data warehouse and then create SPC charts, so you can view the data and respond to it based on special causes. So this was done on SQL Server's reporting services. But the challenge you have here again is this was a manual solution just using coding. So when it came to phasing, so again, you can see here the control limits are stepped. When it came to phasing, we had to have a manual there was a manual process where our analysts would go into a data table, say what date the special cause variation started, when it ended, then run the script so it recalculates the limits. Now you can already see this is quite a lengthy task, and we had to have a dedicated analyst whose main role was to manage these charts. So again, this solution helped with our scaling up of SPC within the organization, but it wasn't a sustainable solution. So we had to stick with SPC Chart just at trust-wide level. But if you wanted to go down to a granular level, such as directorate award, it was impossible, because if you think about it, if you've got 500 charts, when you have that many different filters, it goes beyond exponentially, so you can't manually maintain all of it. And that is one of the reasons why we partnered with Cloud2 to come up with a solution that would allow us to build SPC charts at scale without the need for having someone to manually create them, manually manage it. So moving on to the next slide. So part of our journey over the past 2 years, we've been working at revitalizing our business intelligence system. So we've been working with Power BI, and this slide here just gives you an overview of some of the key principles we wanted our analytics to encompass going forward. And you'd see right in the middle, we've got improvement methodology embedded. So once you start using SPC charts and the drive and the value of it is shown and it's proven to your staff, you're going to see there's a whole lot more demand for SPC charts. You're going to see teams and wards asking about SPC charts. So we're going to see our data as SPC charts for our ward, not just for the trust board. Now you need a solution that's scalable and that would allow you to provide them with that information. And we did struggle with that for a few years until we worked on this solution. And now we have SPC charts using the Cloud2 solution within Power BI, but integrated with a lot of the other standard measures that people would be looking at. So moving away from just improvement measures, but thinking more about the holistic system of quality control. So commissioning charts that relate to commissioners' requirements, sequence, all the statutory measures that we look at, they're all provided as SPC charts now. And it goes down from trust level all the way down to the granular ward level. And I'll hand you back over to Tom, who'll give you a brief overview of what I just spoke about in detail.
So this is exciting, but it's also rather scary. And it might be for some of you out there that have begun the journey that East London started quite a few years ago. So this is our integrated app solution, and this is just for inpatients. And I just wanted to describe some of the levels we've got to. So we have a high levels inpatient summary, which has 3 SPC charts contained within it. We have population health pages. There are 4 of those with 20 SPC charts. We have quality, safety and flow pages. There are 10 of those pages with 49 SPC charts. There's a value section, again with 5 further SPC charts. So what have we got there? We've got 77 SPC charts in this suite. We have 6 areas and a trust-wide view, 6 directorates and a trust-wide view. They each have their own set of that 77. Within each area and trust view, we also have 75 inpatient wards or inpatient areas. You can see where we're going now. Just in this inpatient solution, we have 34,000 SPC charts generated daily for board level, for directorate level, for ward level, for team level, all able to digest their SPC charts at the level that they need it to make decisions. Before we had this solution with Cloud2, we had a reasonably automated solution, or at least we thought so. So we have a data warehouse where we can create procedures to automatically feed charts that we can put in Excel. We had pre-designed templates where all the rules, all the procedures, all the charts were already set up. We only had to lift the data into it. We had pre-designed reports where we could just lift the charts into and set them away. But even with this method, we could say actually it took no time at all to run the procedures overnight, because we were asleep and the data warehouse was doing the hard work while we were sleeping. And perhaps it takes minimal amount of time to lift that data from the data warehouse into our preset Excel templates, maybe just 10 seconds ago, locating the file, dropping the data in. And then perhaps it takes minimal amount of time, perhaps only 5 seconds, to then lift that data into our preset reporting templates. But with 34,000 reports, even running at 15 seconds a time, and that's a pretty conservative estimate of how long it takes to go through those processes, we suddenly arrive at a total like this. And this is where I say it's scary: 141 hours of staff time, or 19 staff, that would be theoretically required just to produce the scale of the solution we have at the moment. And like I say, that's only inpatients. When we consider the other areas of the trust we work in, community health, population health, primary care, it could be that we're working with over 100,000 charts in the very near future, populating every day from board to ward to team, all using this meaningful way of representing data to make decisions. And we couldn't be able to do that using even reasonably automated method. We needed a solution that can run this every day, all the time. So just from summary from the Alfred experience here, just a reminder is that the flow chart that we've got, which very easily identifies the models of SPC Chart that can give you the greatest reflection of your data, considering things like your cohort sizes, your data types, and the frequency of the events. And I just encourage people just to take advantage, run some scenarios, run some comparative analysis like we did, and see the extra strength you get when you add in that extra data, that intelligence that you already know about your systems. And then the second thing is, if you're beginning your journey now in rolling out SPC charts in your trust or area, and I'm sure it's gaining great traction and people are beginning to ask for their own areas and their own wards of data to be presented to them, is have a think about the ELF journey and have a think about how quickly the demand for SPC charts went into the thousands and eventually will go into the hundreds of thousands, and what type of solution you will need to manage that. Okay, I'm going to pass to Oliver here.
Excellent. Thanks for that, everyone. Really insightful stuff there from Forid and Tom and the Ireland team. I just really wanted to quickly just share some of the resources that we will be sharing following the live event today. You'll probably receive these by email tomorrow, so do look out for them. So there is going to be an ELF case study if you want to find out a little bit more information about what East London Foundation Trust are doing with their SPC charts, etc. There is also a step-by-step user guide video on YouTube, which is about a 5-minute video sharing some of the functionality and features within the custom visuals which we've developed alongside East London Foundation Trust. So if you'd like to understand a bit more about what those custom visuals can do for you and how they would help you, as they have with East London Foundation Trust, then feel free to have a look at that as well. As Tom mentioned in the slides as well, we will be providing a link to some of the resources that East London Foundation Trust have very kindly provided for the rest of the world, essentially, to have access to in terms of helping decide which charts to use, etc., etc. And a lot of information is on their website there for QI and BI teams who are looking at using SPC charts. And lastly, we have got a free version of the SPC Chart available to download from AppSource, so you can do that right now if you like as well. And it just gives you the opportunity to play around with the C chart in Power BI. It won't have all the functionality and features which the step-by-step user guide video will share. That is at an additional license, and feel free to contact us if you'd like any more information on that as well. There has been a few questions in chat which have been coming through into the Q&A poll. Please do add more questions, but I'll just start to run by a few of those now. So a few people have asked if the slide pack will also be available at the end. So I think the answer is yes to that. We'll look to provide the slides as well. If Tom, I guess if you if that's okay with you guys as well. We may need to just double check that there's no paid information or anything that we can't share, maybe remove 1 or 2 slides or hide things. But other than that, unless Tom, you've got any issues with that or any reasons why we can't.
I'd be more than happy to share the slide deck, and I think it would be a great opportunity to see some of the examples that we've run through, and then people can start using examples themselves to start their discussions.
Excellent. Perfect. Okay, so that's great. So along with the other resources, we'll also share along the slide deck as well. So you've got all that, and you obviously can share that with your colleagues as well. Okay, I'll just go through a few of the other questions. So Tom, I think this one may be for you, but if not, we can always see who else can answer this. But first question is, do you have criteria that needs to be satisfied in order to apply the process breaks in the charts? And how do you capture this narrative and ensure organizational memory?
Okay, so there's a few things that could be relating to. So obviously, we've demonstrated the flow chart and how easy it is to identify the correct model to use. In terms of the process limits and the control limits, which I think was referenced as well, is there are set formulae, and which are widely available, and resources to setting the process limits for those charts, and it's always based on the data. And as you can see with the P chart that we saw there, is those, set on the data itself, is, when there's a lot of data, the confidence limits reflect that. When there's less data, the confidence limits also reflect that, and they also reflect the volatility of the system. And that's the great thing about statistical process control, is it isn't people setting their own limits, their own expectations of the system. It's the data itself setting the limits of the system. So therefore, you've got an evidence-based system approach to when things change, and you can then reflect that. Forid, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add. So I think they're also talking about in terms of when you actually do a process break, or sometimes it's known as a recalculating of limits. So that there's set rules that's used widely within the industry. So we use the model for improvement rules, which is 5 special cause rules, such as shift, trend, and call, which is readily available on the ELF-QR microsite. It's available if you just Google it too. But the tool itself will pick up the special cause variations for you. So there's no need for you to actually count individual points and see if it's above or below the limit. It would pick it up for you, and then it's got a very quick way of actually applying the process break. Because I think that's one challenge that people come across when they're using SPC charts at scale. It's quite easy, not easy, but it's relatively simple to create SPC charts, a bunch of SPC charts. But when you're trying to interpret them and actually take actions based on what the data is telling you, that process break element can be the challenge. So as I said earlier, we had a analyst who was manually checking and then manually applying the process breaks, whereas this tool is literally one click of a button and it lets you do that.
Excellent, thank you for that, Forid and Tom. So if I just quickly go to the next question then, are you able to break the SPC charts within the app? I take it with over 34,000 charts, this would need to be an automated solution to break the charts rather than an analyst assessing the characteristics of the chart and applying the break. So Forid,
yep, I'm happy to take this one. So again,
yep.
I think this is relating to process break, so recalculating of limits. But when you scale up that many SPC charts, that you do have that challenge of actually having to monitor every single chart and being able to apply the process breaks where relevant. So the system that ELF adopted, and which we did a whole series of training events. So not just our analysts, but our frontline staff. So every level within the organization, we've been training them on using SPC methodology. So it's not just a case of seeing the chart, but being able to interpret it, regardless of what level you are at, is very important. So that ownership doesn't just sit within the informatics department or within the analyst who's developing the report. That ownership sits with the business, so performance managers within the different services, to be able to look at the charts and be able to apply the process breaks where necessary. You can and I know this conversation goes around a lot in terms of, can you automate process breaks? As soon as a special cause is seen, the system would automatically recalculate, but it's not something that we are looking to go by, because when you see a special cause, the most important thing with SPC charts is understanding narrative. What is happening? The chart is just data. It's just telling you, all right, this is something weird is happening, but it's down to an individual to go and investigate, see what is happening, and adding a narrative to that. So the charts you can annotate, but you need to be able to take actions according to that. So we've embedded that into our process. So when you see a special cause, that business manager would go in, work out what's happened, add an annotation, and see if it's appropriate, and then do the process break. And that's not possible with just an analyst sitting in a business intelligence department. That needs to be locally owned with the services.
Excellent, thanks for that, Forid. And yeah, there was just a little sort of clarity on that as well, as you was responding to that in regards to that question. They were just saying that it was in relation to where a known change in the process is reflected by adjusting the control limit, so a step change.
Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you for that. Someone else has just said that it's an outstanding journey from scratch to advanced level. That's excellent. Thank you for that feedback there. We would absolutely agree that East London Foundation Trust has been a great journey and a brilliant example for the NHS as well. So we are due to stay on for another few more minutes now. I can see there's still around 50 attendees who are watching live now. So if there are any more questions that you do have, then feel free to keep popping them in the chat. Excellent, Forid, you've answered their questions perfectly.
Yeah, and I think just one point to add to this, and I think the biggest learning we've had is think about your scalability from the start, and then that way you would avoid some of the challenges that we've faced, because we went from manual templates to hard coding and then to a solution that's scalable as the demand increased. But if you think about that right from the get-go, you might be able to you select a solution that allows you to scale up without having to do so many different process changes or infrastructure changes. And we went into SPC from an improvement standpoint, and then it spread it like wildfire. And then now we're looking at it from the quality control, quality assurance, so the full Durance quality management system. So if you think about that and then look at a solution that allows you to do all of that, then it's just a lot more scalable, and you just avoid a lot of the challenges or hurdles that we faced.
Excellent, thanks for that, Forid. So I guess I'll give you another minute or so just to see if there's any more questions coming in before we put that one to an end, really. And like I said before, thank you again for registering to today's live event and experiencing our first live event with East London Foundation Trust as well. It's been excellent, and yeah, we'll send all the resources following in the next day or so, as we've mentioned. And please do get in touch if you've got any other further questions which come out of this session as well. If we can always pop your details to Tom and Forid and Amar as well, who I'm sure will be happy to answer any questions following the event, especially now I'll put them on the spot. Oh, I just see there is a couple more questions just coming in, so let me just publish them as well. So firstly, how have you found the engagement with wider staff in the organisation has been with this tool, particularly ward level and clinical staff? Who would like to take that one? Is that Tom? Do you want to have a pop at that one?
I think given that I've only recently returned to the trust, it might be best sat with Forid.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that one.
No problem.
So I think, yeah, this is another hurdle to think about when it comes to SPC, because it is quite a complex line chart. Now, you showing this to a frontline clinical staff is not going to really get the engagement straight away. With them, it's all about context and narrative. What is it telling them, and how does it help them improve the service they provide to those who are using our services? So during our training sessions and call, we would start with just like with Tom did, but the value of looking at data over time as opposed to line charts and building up that narrative in terms of the strength of using it, and then using SPC. How does SPC charts help us identify areas for improvement? So we've taken case studies on specific stuff around incidents or waiting times and co, and then use that to help with the narrative. But I think it's also important to have champions within the organization. So with we've got quite an extensive training program, and our main one, our improvement leaders program, it gives people the tools around improvement methodology where you learn about SPC charts, and that's open to anyone within the organization. So I think it's very important that it's not top down in terms of the mechanism of rollout. That's open to completely anyone, from admin staff all the way up to a consultant or a director. And then once you start getting people buying into the SPC charts, understanding the value of it, then it just makes it a lot easier to roll out. And again, it's really important to get the balance right too. So SPC chart is not the only way of visualizing data, but it's supposed to be used in tandem with daily data or monthly data. So monthly data or daily data will give you a quick picture of as and now, but the SPC charts give you a really good retrospective view of how the system is performing and what changes can be made, or what improvements can be made to improve the system.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Forid. I think there's been another question from Elizabeth, who's over in a healthcare system at Norway, actually, which is great. Thank you for joining us, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth's question, Forid, is just to clarify her understanding of how you're recalculating them limits, essentially. So her question was, did she hear right when you have to recalculate the limits manually?
Yeah, so the previous tools that we used to use, you would have to, it was completely manual. So you'd go in, you'd manually check the data points. So you'd count and see if you've seen a special cause or not. And then you'd either on Excel, if you're using the QR macros or QR charts tools, you would say the start date, the end date, and then it would recalculate for you. With the SPC tool that we've developed with Cloud 2, it's literally a click of a button. So as soon as the chart picks up a special cause, the data point colors will change, and you can set the colors of every single thing, the line, the limits. So when it appears in red and you've had the conversations with the relevant teams and understand the context behind it, you just click that data point and then it just lets you recalculate. So it's literally a one-step thing. And again, I talked about earlier around why we didn't want to automate it, because that narrative and adding annotations is vital. So anyone looking at that SPC chart, regardless of if they work in the service or not, would understand what happened at that period that led to that shift change.
Excellent, thank you, Forid. And I'm thinking I'm going to keep the screen on yourself, because there's been another question in which I think will be suitable for you to answer. So the question is, how do you cope with small data sets and limited data?
So again, it depends on, so with SPC methodology, it's quite fixed in terms of how many data points you need for specific charts. So what we always say is, and think of SPC chart or using SPC charts as a journey. So if you've got 0 to 9 data points, I would say use a line chart. And then if you've got 10 to 15, you can use a run chart. And then 15 onwards, you can use a control chart, but we call the limits tried limits, which you then recalculate when it's 20. But for the model to calculate the limits effectively, it requires at least 20 data points. And then that's when it's appropriate to use the SPC chart. But as you get new data points every month, every week, however frequently you're measuring, that's when you would change the charts relative to what's appropriate. So you may start off with a line chart, then as the more data points come, you go to a run chart and then to a control chart.
Excellent, thank you for that, Forid. Okay, oh, there's just been, thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's saying thank you for the response there and a great session. Okay, I think we'll close it off there. We're running a little bit over. As I said, do ask any further questions, get in contact with us. We'll be more than happy to respond via email. We can always arrange a call with you as well to discuss further. It's not a problem. And I'd just like to say again, thank you for joining us today, and especially thank you to our presenters, Tom, Forid and Amar, for joining us today and sharing their journey with SPC charts. and I'm sure there'll be another one in another few months where we can provide some more insights for you on the SPC journey. But thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll be in touch with the resources, etc. in shortly. Thank you. Bye.